What is up guys, it's Alex here. What did just happen? Besides the fact that the unemployment skyrocketed to above 6 million people in the United States, a new bill was introduced in the New York Senate that aims at canceling the rent payments for 90 days and as a consequence the mortgage payments for those 90 days. But what the bill aims to do is a complete forgiveness of the rent payments and the mortgage payments from the moment that the bill enters into force. This is so much different than what we had until this point, where the evictions were suspended for a period of 60 days and now prolonged to 90 days, or where the people could request forbearance to the banks for the mortgage payments, but those mortgage payments would be added at the end of the loan and would be recalculated according to the new schedule. This is a complete forgiveness. If this enters into force, it's going to be a game changer. Let's look at how this bill is at the current status in the Judicial Committee. And as a side note, I'm really interested of the impact of this bill on the banking system, because the banks need to get those money from somewhere, because if they're not gonna get it from the landlords, which got it from the tenants in some situations, who's gonna pay those mortgages? Okay guys, so we are going to look at the bill, see the conditions of the bill, who it applies to, and what are the consequences. But keep in mind that this is not into force and it doesn't produce any effect. Okay, so in section 1, we can see that any residential tenant or small business in the state that has lost income or has been forced to close their place of business as a result of government order restriction in response to the outbreak of the virus that shall not be named on YouTube shall have all rent payments suspended for 90 days following the effective date of this act. So up until this point, you can see that any residential tenants or small business commercial tenants will benefit from this bill. Those two categories must have lost income or have been forced to close their place of business as a result of the government or the restrictions in response to the virus that shall not be named. As it says in the end, it looks like it's just a 90-day suspension of payments. But if we go further, it says that such residential tenants or small business commercial tenants shall not and shall never be required to pay any rent waived during such time period. The keywords that you should get from this is that the residential tenants or small business commercial tenants shall never be required to pay any rent waived during such time period. So for those 90 days, the residential tenants and the small business commercial tenants shall not have to pay any rent whatsoever. It is like it disappears. But as a consequence, we need to keep in mind that the state cannot really discriminate between tenants and landlords. They had to do something about the landlords too, because otherwise it would have been a very hard blow onto the landlords, while the tenants would have had a really good time for not paying for 90 days. But when we go further onto section B, we see that a very similar treatment applies to landlords too. Because in section B1 says that any person or entity who faces financial hardship as a result of being deprived of rent payments for property pursuant to this section shall receive forgiveness on any mortgage payments for such property for 90 days. There is a very interesting paragraph below on page 2 that says that any person or entity qualifying for mortgage payment forgiveness under this subdivision shall not and shall never be required to pay any mortgage waived during such time period. So as you can see, similar to what it applies to tenants, where they have a complete forgiveness of the rent for those 90 days. The similar thing applies to landlords who face a financial hardship as a result of being deprived of rent payments. So this is good news because it applies to both the tenants and the landlords, and both benefit from this bill. But the really interesting question, besides the fact that one does not have to pay rent for 90 days and one does not have to pay mortgages for 90 days, which makes both the tenants and the landlords happy, is who's gonna pay that mortgage, because the banks are going to need the payments for those 90 days or 3 months. What I think is going to happen is that the government is going to subsidize those mortgage payments in some way, shape, or form, or I have no idea what they're gonna do, because someone has to pay the banks. They might actually print more money in order to cover those mortgage payments, or I have no idea what they're gonna do, because this will need to be paid. And I think this is something that they will fix during this entire process of getting this bill into force, if it ever gets into force. But this is a really interesting act, and this is a really interesting solution that is being proposed by the New York State. And if this spreads all over the United States, I have no idea what's gonna happen. I have no idea how much money they'll have to print in order to subsidize for the categories that qualify to benefit from this forgiveness under this act, or a similar act that shall be adopted all over the United States. Anyway, keep in mind that in this form that the bill is at this point, the rent forgiveness applies to any residential tenant or small business commercial tenant, and it also applies to a landlord, like any person or entity who faces financial hardship as a result of being deprived of rent payments. Alright guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it's going to come in handy to you. It's going to give you a new perspective. Please keep in mind that this is not into force. I'm going to put the link in the description down below so you can look the entire legislative process and where the bill is at a certain point in time. So you might find out the fastest when this bill comes into force, if it comes into force, or if there are going to be any amendments to this bill. Feel free to demolish the living hells out of the like button if you enjoyed this video and if it was helpful for you. It might help with the YouTube lords to spread this video to a little bit more people. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Until next time, my friends, take care, have a wonderful day. Peace!